Anne Margaret wasn't just a dazzling actress and singer. To millions, she was the vibrant heartbeat of 1960s Hollywood, the girl who could do it all with a magnetism that pulled you in and never let go. Then the whispers started, feuds with co-stars, tensions with directors, and career choices that left fans speculating about what really happened behind the glamorous facade. Today, at 72, she's breaking the silence and addressing the 5 names that industry insiders have long suspected caused her the most friction throughout her legendary career. Some are expected. Others, they might surprise even her most dedicated fans. Keep watching, because by the end, the blueprint of Anne Margaret's meteoric rise, rumored conflicts, and ultimately triumphant legacy will finally make sense. Let's dive in. Few stars have maintained the mystique of Anne Margret Olsen, born in Stockholm, Sweden, before moving to America as a child. Her journey from Fox Lake, Illinois to the glittering heights of Hollywood reads like a fairy tale, but with complications that only now are coming into focus. The fiery-haired performer burst onto the scene in 1961 when her explosive screen test at 20th Century Fox left executives speechless. "She moves like liquid fire," one producer reportedly remarked, setting the stage for a career that would defy categorization. What made Anne Margaret different was her rare triple threat status. She could act with vulnerable depth, sing with smoky passion, and dance with an abandon that made censors nervous. Her first major break came when she signed with RCA Victor as a recording artist, earning the nickname the female Elvis before she'd even met the king himself. But it was her electrifying performance in the 1963 musical Bye Bye Birdie that cemented her status as Hollywood's newest sensation. Remember that opening sequence? The simple blue background, Anne Margaret singing directly to the camera with a playfulness that somehow managed to be both innocent and knowing. That 3-minute segment was so impactful that director George Sidney reportedly added it after the film was complete, recognizing he had captured lightning in a bottle. Then came Viva Las Vegas in 1964, where she starred opposite Elvis Presley in a pairing that generated heat both on and off the screen. Their chemistry was undeniable, their dance sequences electric, and suddenly Anne Margaret wasn't just a promising newcomer. She was a full-fledged star with a persona that mixed sweetness with sizzle in a combination America couldn't resist. Throughout the 1960s, she continued to build her reputation with performances in films like The Cincinnati Kid alongside Steve McQueen and The Swinger, showcasing her ability to hold her own against Hollywood's most magnetic leading men. Her career trajectory took a more serious turn in 1971 when her role as Bobby in Mike Nichols' Carnal Knowledge earned her an Academy Award nomination and proved to critics that beneath the sex kitten image was an actress of considerable depth and nuance. You might remember that raw, vulnerable scene where her character breaks down. It revealed a completely different side of Anne Margaret, one that surprised those who had dismissed her as merely a glamorous performer. This wasn't just a reinvention, it was a revelation. But behind the scenes of this meteoric rise, all was not sequins and standing ovations. Hollywood in the 1960s and 70s was a complex ecosystem of power dynamics, territorial battles, and strategic alliances. For a young woman navigating this landscape, particularly one whose appeal crossed so many different entertainment categories, the politics could be brutal and unforgiving. Industry insiders have long suggested that Anne Margaret's path was complicated by relationships that turned from supportive to challenging, and by power players who didn't always have her best interests at heart. According to various biographies and interviews over the years, certain figures in Anne Margaret's professional life became points of significant tension. From controlling managers to jealous co-stars, from studio executives who tried to pigeonhole her to directors who allegedly took credit for her natural talents, the full picture of her rise includes shadows that have rarely been discussed in detail. These weren't simply professional disagreements, they were relationships that reportedly shaped major career decisions, affected her personal happiness, and in some cases, led to lasting rifts in Hollywood's tight-knit community. While Anne Margaret herself has maintained a largely diplomatic public persona throughout her decades in the spotlight, Sources close to the star have suggested that certain names stand out when it comes to people who allegedly made her professional journey more difficult than it needed to be. Today, we're counting down the 5 individuals that insiders believe caused Anne-Margret the most grief throughout her storied career, the conflicts that may have altered her trajectory in ways both subtle and profound. Are you ready to see Hollywood history through a new lens? Here are the 5 names that reportedly represent Anne-Margret's most challenging professional relationships, according to those who witnessed her remarkable career from the inside. Number 5.
Elvis Presley.
Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis Presley's notoriously controlling manager, reportedly became a significant thorn in Anne-Margret's side during what should have been one of the most joyful periods of her early career. The issue? Her undeniable chemistry with Elvis during and after Viva Las Vegas, a connection that allegedly threatened Parker's iron grip on every aspect of the King's career and personal life. The origin of this rift began innocently enough on the set of Viva Las Vegas in 1964. By all accounts, Anne-Margret and Elvis connected immediately, recognizing in each other a similar background of humble beginnings and explosive talent. They shared Swedish heritage. Elvis's distant ancestors were Swedish, a love of motorcycles, and that indefinable quality that makes certain performers impossible to ignore on screen. According to multiple biographies, including Anne-Margret's own 1994 autobiography, their professional respect quickly blossomed into a deep personal relationship. For a time, they were Hollywood's most exciting potential power couple, young, gorgeous, and wildly talented. But what audiences saw on screen, the scorching dance numbers, the playful banter, the harmonized songs, was only half the story. Behind the scenes, Colonel Parker allegedly watched this blossoming relationship with growing alarm. According to several Elvis biographers, Parker had carefully cultivated Elvis's image as an eligible bachelor to maintain his appeal to female fans. Moreover, he had already orchestrated a relationship between Elvis and Priscilla Beaulieu, whom Elvis would eventually marry. Anne-Margret, with her independent career and equally powerful star quality, reportedly represented a variable that Parker couldn't control. The evidence of Parker's interference came swiftly. Despite the film's success and the obvious chemistry between its stars, there was never a second Presley-Anne-Margret pairing, though fans desperately wanted one. More tellingly, according to reports in Albert Goldman's biography of Elvis, Parker ensured that Anne-Margret's musical performances from the film received minimal promotion compared to Elvis's songs. Her version of My Rival, ironically enough, was allegedly buried by Parker's influence at RCA Records, despite being a standout track. Fans at the time noticed the strange promotional imbalance, with Elvis's solo songs from the soundtrack receiving heavy radio play, while the duets were notably absent from rotation. What this meant for Anne-Margret was a hard early lesson in Hollywood politics. Here she was, at the beginning of a promising career, reportedly finding herself sidelined not because of her talent, but because of a behind-the-scenes power broker's agenda. According to friends quoted in various biographies, the situation caused her considerable emotional distress, especially when stories were leaked to the press, hinting that she had pursued Elvis aggressively, casting her as a homewrecker rather than one half of a genuine connection. When Elvis ended their relationship in 1964 and later married Priscilla Beaulieu, many close to the situation believed Parker's influence had been the deciding factor. Perhaps most significantly, this early experience with Parker allegedly taught Anne-Margret a painful lesson about power in Hollywood. Who had it, how it was wielded, and how even the brightest talents could find themselves pawns in someone else's game. But could this early conflict have prepared her for an even more complex relationship that would shape the next phase of her career? You won't believe who's next on our countdown. Number 4.
Alan Carr.
Alan Carr, the flamboyant producer and manager who briefly took control of Anne-Margret's career in the early 1970s, reportedly created a professional situation so stifling that it nearly derailed her hard-won credibility as a serious actress. The core of the conflict, a fundamental disagreement about whether Anne Margaret should embrace or transcend her sex symbol image, a battle that came at a crucial moment in her artistic evolution. The professional relationship between Anne Margaret and Carr began around 1970, just as she was fighting to be taken seriously as an actress rather than simply a glamorous entertainer. Having just delivered a powerful performance in RPM opposite Anthony Quinn, Anne Margaret was reportedly seeking management that would help her continue this transition to more dramatic roles. Carr, who had made his name producing splashy commercial entertainment, initially seemed supportive of her goals. According to industry insiders quoted in entertainment publications of the era, he promised to help reshape her image while maintaining her core appeal. Yet what played out on screen versus behind the scenes revealed starkly different visions. While Anne Margaret was earning critical respect with her raw performance in Carnal Knowledge, 1971, Carr was allegedly busy booking her into a Las Vegas stage show that emphasized her as a sequined sex symbol, precisely the image she had been trying to evolve beyond. Those who worked with Anne Margaret during this period have suggested that Carr saw her Oscar-nominated dramatic work as a fortunate anomaly rather than a new direction, preferring to capitalize on the more marketable aspects of her persona. According to reports in entertainment columns of the time, he even referred to her as his Swedish bombshell in press materials, a description she had reportedly grown to resent. The receipts of this professional tug-of-war became public in several unmistakable ways. First, there was the famous 1972 CBS television special, Anne Margaret When You're Smiling, which Carr produced. While Anne Margaret delivered technically flawless performances, many critics at the time noted the special seemed designed to showcase her physical attributes rather than her growing range as a performer. Then came the Las Vegas stage show at the Hilton International, where she performed in costumes that, according to a Variety review at the time, left little to the imagination. Entertainment journalists noted the disconnect between the serious actress who had just earned an Academy Award nomination and the Vegas performer who seemed to be retreating to safer, more commercial territory. Fans were divided, some disappointed that she wasn't pursuing more challenging film roles, others delighted to see her return to the entertaining spectacle that had made her famous. What this meant for Anne Margaret was a period of reported professional frustration at what should have been the most triumphant time in her career. According to several biographers, the conflict between her artistic ambitions and Carr's commercial instincts created significant tension. She had worked incredibly hard to prove herself as more than just a beautiful woman who could sing and dance, only to find herself pushed back into that limited category by her own management. Industry insiders have suggested that this period represented a significant crossroads for Anne Margaret, a moment when she had to decide whether to acquiesce to others' vision for her career or fight for her own. The relationship with Carr was relatively short-lived, but its impact reportedly lasted much longer. And while this clash of visions was playing out in her professional life, another even more complex relationship was developing, one that would challenge her in ways both personal and professional. Who could have had an even more complicated influence on Anne Margaret's career trajectory? The answer might surprise you. Number 3.
Mike Nichols.
Mike Nichols, the acclaimed director who gave Anne Margaret her most critically successful role in Carnal Knowledge, paradoxically became a source of deep professional conflict, according to those close to the production. The issue? A complex dynamic of artistic control, credit for her performance, and what some insiders have described as a Pygmalion complex that allegedly left Anne Margaret feeling both grateful for the opportunity and resentful of the narrative that emerged around her powerful performance. The beginning of their professional relationship couldn't have seemed more promising. In 1970, Nichols was coming off a string of critical and commercial successes, including The Graduate and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. When he cast Anne Margaret as the emotionally vulnerable Bobby in his new film Carnal Knowledge, it was widely viewed as a major vote of confidence in her dramatic abilities. By all accounts, Anne Margaret was deeply committed to proving herself worthy of the role, reportedly spending hours developing the character and pushing herself to emotional places she had never explored on screen before. According to production notes from the time, Nichols initially praised her dedication and natural instincts, but As filming progressed, the dynamic between director and actress reportedly became more complicated. On screen, audiences witnessed a revelatory performance, Margret stripped of glamour, portraying a woman's psychological unraveling with haunting authenticity. The transformation was so complete that it earned her an Academy Award nomination and changed many critics' perception of her talents overnight. Off-screen, however, several crew members later suggested that Nichols began taking increasing credit for transforming Margret from sex symbol to serious actress, a narrative that allegedly diminished her own preparation, intuition, and hard work. The contrast between public narratives and private reality became increasingly stark following the film's release. Press interviews, Nichols was quoted as saying he had discovered the actress inside the entertainer, language that, according to friends of Margret quoted in later biographies, felt dismissive of her previous dramatic work in films like Kitten with a Whip. Meanwhile, Margret herself was placed in the awkward position of expressing gratitude for the career-changing opportunity while watching her own agency in creating the performance being subtly undermined. According to a makeup artist who worked on the film and was later quoted in a film retrospective, everyone acted like he hypnotized her into that performance. But I saw her prep work. She brought that character to life through her own hard work and talent. The receipts of this complex dynamic played out in the film's aftermath. Critics' reviews, while praising Margret extensively, often framed her success in terms of Nichols's direction rather than her own abilities. A prominent film magazine reportedly described her as Nichols's greatest magic trick, turning the kitten into a lion. At the Academy Awards, where she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, the camera frequently cut between Margret and Nichols, visually reinforcing the director-as-creator narrative. And in subsequent years, the film has been regularly cited as an example of a director's ability to elicit unexpected performances from actors, a framing that some close to Margret have suggested she found reductive. What this meant for Margret was a bittersweet breakthrough. Her most acclaimed performance came with an asterisk that partly attributed her success to someone else's vision rather than her own talents. According to entertainment journalists who interviewed her in subsequent years, this experience allegedly made her more protective of her artistic contributions and more careful about the narratives that surrounded her work. While she maintained public respect for Nichols and gratitude for the role, insiders have suggested the experience left her with complicated feelings about how female performers' achievements are contextualized in Hollywood. The Nichols chapter represents a uniquely complex entry in our countdown, a relationship that was simultaneously beneficial and undermining, supportive and diminishing. But as Margret continued navigating her career, an even more challenging relationship was developing with someone much closer to home, who could have created even more significant tension in both her personal and professional life. The answer reveals another layer of Hollywood's complicated power dynamics. Number 2.
Roger Smith.
Roger Smith, Margret's husband of over 50 years and eventual manager, reportedly created one of the most complex and challenging dynamics in her professional life, despite their enduring marriage. The issue? According to industry insiders, a shift from supportive spouse to controlling manager that allegedly resulted in career decisions that prioritized short-term financial gain over artistic growth, creating tension between their personal relationship and professional ambitions. The beginning of their relationship seemed like a Hollywood dream. They met at the Sahara Hotel in Las Vegas in 1966, where Smith, a former actor best known for his role in the television series 77 Sunset Strip, was reportedly immediately captivated by Margret's performance. Friends described their early relationship as genuinely romantic and supportive. After they married in 1967, Smith initially continued his own career while cheering on his wife's successes from the sidelines. According to various biographies, he was particularly supportive during her Oscar-nominated turn in Carnal Knowledge, reportedly helping her prepare for the emotionally demanding role. But what audiences saw, a glamorous Hollywood couple with staying power in an industry known for brief marriages, masked a more complicated professional evolution. Behind the scenes, Smith gradually stepped away from his own acting career and, by the mid-1970s, had taken over as Anne Margaret's manager. According to entertainment journalists who covered her career during this period, the shift coincided with a noticeable change in her project selection. The actress, who had been building a respected dramatic portfolio, suddenly began appearing in less challenging television specials, Las Vegas reviews, and films that seemed chosen more for their paycheck than their artistic merit. The contrast between her early career trajectory and this new direction became increasingly apparent to both critics and fans. On screen, Anne Margaret's filmography began featuring more commercial, less critically respected projects. Films like The Villain and Middle-Age Crazy, while financially successful, did little to build on the dramatic credibility she had worked so hard to establish. Off-screen, industry sources reported growing tension between Anne Margaret's artistic aspirations and Smith's management decisions. According to several production staff members quoted anonymously in film magazines of the era, she would occasionally express frustration on set about elements of projects that didn't align with her vision for her career. The receipts of this professional friction appeared in several public ways. First, there was the notable absence of Anne Margaret from the kind of prestigious, challenging films that her talent clearly warranted throughout the late 1970s and 1980s. Critics frequently commented on this puzzling career trajectory, with one prominent reviewer reportedly writing, "Few actresses have been so obviously underutilized in their prime years." Additionally, several directors who had hoped to work with her during this period later commented on the difficulty of getting projects approved by her management. According to a well-respected filmmaker quoted in a film retrospective, "There was always another Vegas show or TV special that took priority. It was frustrating because we all knew what she was capable of." What this meant for Anne Margaret was a career that, while financially successful and longevity-focused, arguably never fully realized the artistic potential glimpsed in her early dramatic work. According to friends quoted in various biographies, she sometimes struggled with the dual role Smith played in her life, trusted husband and business manager with different priorities than her own. The situation allegedly created an impossible dynamic where professional disagreements became personal and vice versa, making it difficult for her to assert her own vision without threatening their relationship. Despite these reported tensions, it's worth noting that Anne Margaret and Smith remained married until his death in 2017, suggesting a personal bond that transcended professional differences. Still, industry insiders have long speculated about the films she might have made and the roles she might have played had her career been guided differently during these crucial decades. But before Smith became such an influential figure in her professional life, there was one earlier relationship that reportedly caused Anne Margaret even greater distress, a conflict at the very start of her career that allegedly set a pattern for years to come. Who tops our countdown? The answer reveals how early career experiences can shape a star's entire trajectory. Number 1.
George Sidney.
George Sidney, the director who helped launch Anne Margaret's film career with Bye Bye Birdie, reportedly became her most problematic professional relationship, according to numerous Hollywood insiders. The core issue, an allegedly inappropriate fixation masked as mentorship that not only affected her first major film, but established a troubling pattern of how men in power would treat her throughout her early career, creating a template that she would spend years trying to break. The origin of this complex relationship began when Sidney cast the then unknown Anne Margaret in Bye Bye Birdie in 1963. Initially cast in a small supporting role as the teenage character Kim McAfee, Anne Margaret was supposed to be secondary to stars Janet Leigh and Dick Van Dyke. According to production accounts, Sidney became instantly captivated by the young performer's screen presence and began systematically expanding her role during filming. What started as professional recognition of her star quality allegedly evolved into something more problematic, with multiple crew members later reporting that Sidney's attention to Anne Margaret went beyond normal director-actress interactions. The contrast between what audiences saw on screen versus what reportedly happened during production is striking. On screen, viewers witness the birth of a star, particularly in the famous opening and closing sequences where Anne Margret sings directly to the camera, sequences that were allegedly added after principal photography was complete because Sidney insisted on showcasing her more prominently. Off-screen, according to several crew members who later spoke to biographers, Sidney's focus on Anne Margret reportedly created tension on set, particularly with Janet Leigh, who was ostensibly the film's female lead, but found herself increasingly sidelined as Sidney restructured the film around its young discovery. The receipts of this difficult dynamic became public in several unmistakable ways. Most notably, the finished film itself bears witness to Sidney's preoccupation. Anne Margret's role grew so substantially that the movie's focus shifted noticeably away from its original structure. Critics at the time commented on the strange imbalance, with one reviewer noting, "It's as if two different films are competing for screen time." Additionally, Janet Leigh herself later acknowledged the uncomfortable situation in interviews, diplomatically referring to changes in the film's direction that happened during production. Perhaps most tellingly, Anne Margret's autobiography delicately references this period with carefully chosen words about learning to navigate complicated working relationships from the very beginning of her career. What this meant for Anne Margret went far beyond this single film. According to entertainment historians, Sidney's behavior allegedly established a troubling precedent for how young female performers could be treated, showcased, and simultaneously exploited, promoted, and objectified in the same breath. While the role unquestionably launched her career, insiders suggest it came with psychological complications that took years to fully process. Moreover, the pattern reportedly continued with Sidney allegedly attempting to control aspects of her early career, recommending her for roles that emphasized her sexuality over her other talents, and, according to some accounts, reacting poorly when she began making independent career choices. Perhaps most significantly, this initial experience reportedly shaped Anne Margret's understanding of the price of stardom in Hollywood, particularly for young women, and created patterns of professional relationships that would take years to recognize and restructure. According to those who worked with her in subsequent decades, the experience made her simultaneously more guarded and more determined to eventually take control of her own career and image, a goal that would prove elusive for much longer than she might have hoped. The relationship with Sidney represents the most consequential entry in our countdown because it allegedly occurred at such a formative moment in her career, establishing dynamics and expectations that would echo through subsequent decades of professional relationships. But how did these 5 complicated relationships collectively shape the arc of Anne Margret's remarkable career? The answer reveals much about both Hollywood's power structures and one performer's resilience in navigating them. The 5 names on our countdown: George Sidney, Roger, Smith, Mike Nichols, Alan Carr, and Colonel Tom Parker represent more than just difficult personal relationships in Anne Margret's life. Together, they illuminate a pattern that many female performers of her generation reportedly experienced. A career where artistic control was consistently mediated through men in positions of power, creating a complex dance between opportunity and autonomy that shaped every professional decision. Looking at these relationships collectively, certain themes emerge that help explain Anne Margret's unique career trajectory. From Sidney's allegedly inappropriate fixation that launched her career but established troubling precedents, to Parker's reported interference in her relationship with Elvis that taught her hard lessons about Hollywood politics, to Nichols's complex role in both elevating and taking credit for her dramatic breakthrough, to Carr's commercial packaging that clashed with her artistic ambitions, and finally to Smith's management decisions that prioritized financial stability over creative risk. Each relationship represented a different facet of the entertainment industry's power dynamics. The cumulative effect, according to those who have studied her career, was a star whose dazzling talent was simultaneously promoted and constrained by the very individuals who recognized its value. This paradox perhaps explains the curious gaps in Anne Margret's filmography. the notable absence of roles that might have further showcased her dramatic range during certain periods, the retreat into safer commercial territory just when artistic breakthroughs seemed imminent, the long stretches devoted to live performances rather than building on critical momentum. Today, Margret's legacy stands as one of remarkable longevity and versatility despite these reported challenges. At 72, she has maintained a career spanning 6 decades, transitioning from 1960s sex symbol to dramatic actress to television performer with a grace that belies the behind-the-scenes complications. Her later work in films like Grumpy Old Men and numerous television roles introduced her to new generations of fans, while her Las Vegas performances continued well into her 60s, showcasing her enduring appeal as a live entertainer. Perhaps most importantly, friends and colleagues report that Margret eventually found a measure of peace with her complex professional history. According to those close to her, she came to recognize that while certain relationships may have limited aspects of her career, they were also instrumental in creating opportunities that might otherwise have been unavailable. This nuanced perspective, acknowledging both the constraints and the possibilities these relationships created, speaks to a wisdom hard-won through decades in an often unforgiving industry. What do you think about these complicated dynamics that reportedly shaped Margret's career? Were they simply the reality of Hollywood in that era? Or do they reflect issues that continue to affect performers today? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Margret's career and the relationships that allegedly influenced it, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more thoughtful explorations of Hollywood's most fascinating stars. Next week, we'll be examining another legendary performer whose public image only tells half the story. Until then, remember that even the most glamorous careers often contain untold chapters that deserve to be understood with both honesty and empathy.